Happy New Year with Orchid Medley Chit Chat number 16. Some orchids from a few months ago, you're probably wondering how they're doing, plus an interesting Phalaenopsis update. All of this and more coming up at the Orchid Hut. Welcome back to the Orchid Hut. My name is Dana and thank you for joining me in this Orchid Medley Chit Chat video where we talk about a variety of orchids and a variety of things that are going on with those different orchids. I hope you have had a fabulous start to the beginning of 2024 and that your orchid collection is doing fabulous. Mine, is indoors for the winter. Over the next couple of days, we are expecting our very first hard freeze, which here in Southeast Texas means a good 12 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit below the freezing point. So the last couple of days, we have spent covering some shrubs and some things growing in the landscape that are a bit more sensitive in the hopes of, saving that from being completely destroyed by the hard freeze, which does sometimes happen. And you do the best you can, but sometimes you do lose a few of your plants in the landscape when the weather gets so severe, as it tends to do these days. It seems like once or twice every winter now. But today's video is going to first be about some orchids that I just kind of want to bring back in front of the camera. You haven't seen them for a few months, and show you what's going on. And then at the very end, I will save all of the discussion about the Phalaenopsis orchids, what they're doing, and some interesting things that are going on. And I'll put a timestamp when I edit this video so that you know when the Phalaenopsis segment begins, just in case you are a Phalaenopsis only type grower and that's the part of the video that you're interested in. So if you enjoy this video or learn something new, please hit that like button along the way. The subscribe button is beneath the video. Don't forget the notifications bell to let you know when I've posted something new. And if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Okay, so I'm going to take a short little break, get the Phalaenopsis orchids out of the way, and be back with the other orchids we will be discussing today in the Orchid Medley Chit Chat. Be right back. Okay, so the very first orchid that we are going to be having a look at is the Dendrobium nestor that I added to my collection towards the latter half of 2023. So I took care of it towards the very end of the summer and into the fall. And it is an orchid that does like a winter's rest, and it does drop all of its leaves. But I kind of decided, based on the previous grower's recommendation, to mostly let Mother Nature take care of Dendrobium nestor over the winter. And the only time I have been sort of intervening is if we have been receiving rain, and I really don't want this orchid to get wet, so I would put it in the garage if rain was in the forecast, although it was still getting light there. And if temperatures were going to be dropping or approaching freezing, like is in our forecast right now, I do bring the orchid in and leave it in the bathroom for the days that it is really, really cold. Otherwise, it is hanging in its spot, outside under the tree where it had been growing for the latter half of 2023. So as you can see from this insert video, it is beginning to have leaves that are turning yellow. Many of the leaves have already fallen and more are beginning to turn yellow. So it is going into its dormancy. I have given it water maybe twice since about October. So it's not getting a complete dry winter's rest, but is approaching that. So we'll see how it does. Cross your fingers, maybe I will have some gorgeous blooms on all those canes sometime in the spring. The next orchid that I wanted to show you was this bulbal phylum that I transferred from its wooden slat basket, because it really wasn't doing too great with its root system, into this sort of little rescue plastic dish here. And I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen if you would like to go and watch the video about why I decided to do this and how I did this setup. But I wanted to show you the progress because I did this about 3 months ago, and it is a configuration where there are some wicks that can absorb water from this bottom tray up into the sphagnum moss and leca where the bulbal phylum is actually planted. Now, the only thing I have changed from that original setup in the video from 3 months ago is I have added a little bit of sphagnum on the top, because many of these little bulbs were actually putting on new roots, and it seemed like they might like a little bit more moisture than just what the leca was providing. So there is some good news here actually, and I think this is doing pretty well considering. There's a new growth right here, and there's a new growth that was kind of buried a little bit, but I think it will work its way up. So you can see another new little growth right there down in the bottom of the plastic. It's right down in there, and I think that will be able to work its way up. Now, as far as root system goes, and that's kind of hanging up on my sleeve, so I don't want to make sure I don't pull that out of there. As far as new roots goes, you know, I can't, I guess, exactly expect in the winter that it's just going to put on a phenomenal amount of new root growth. But you can see a little bit right here, and it may not show on camera, but there's a little bit of new root growth right down there that you can see through the plastic. Now, as things go, this is real life with orchids. One little piece here has kind of fallen out of the tray. There's not any new root growth on this part. However, this new little sprout right here may actually put down some roots. So off camera, what I'm going to have to do is kind of work this back down into the leca and the sphagnum. Now, I have had to handle this carefully, and as you can see, it is a little bit more on the fragile side. But the way I've been taking care of it is just keeping a little bit of water in this tray. The wicks absorb it up, and for the most part, keep the entire thing slightly damp all the time. Every once in a while, I do spray the top just to keep the sphagnum a little bit more moist if the wick is not keeping it that way. Okay, so let me kind of move this over to the side. Real life with orchids. You go to handle them and something happens. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now, the next orchid is Oncidium Sherry Baby, and this was also a repot about 3 months ago, and it was a little bit unconventional because I repotted this completely in leca, lava rock, and some sponge rock. There is no bark in here. There is no sphagnum moss, and this has been this way for about 3 months. Now, you can tell that it's doing okay. The bulbs, are not shriveling or doing anything unusual because of dehydration or anything like that. It has managed to stay healthy under the grow lights for the beginning of the winter. This is getting soaked about every 10 to 14 days. So I put the entire pot in some water and let it soak for just a little bit. And I did this yesterday, and as I'm touching the clay pot, I can still tell that it's a little bit damp. So it does take a few days, for the moisture to completely leave this pot. And then, in a matter of days, it's being soaked again. So far it has been appreciating this care during the winter. And I'm just going to continue on this course and then figure out how to transition this one outside for the growing season. All right, next up is going to be a little clip of a Vanda, and this would be a first-time bloomer for me, not only for this particular Vanda, but just for Vandas in general, because I've never had a Vanda in my collection bloom, but lo and behold, I do have a little bud forming indoors over the winter under the grow lights. Very excited about that. Okay, I will be back with all of the Phalaenopsis orchids after this short break. All right, so back with all of the Phalaenopsis orchids that we're going to talk about today. I took a little count earlier this morning. I have about 24 in my collection now that are mature Phalaenopsis plants that should be blooming size. And out of those 24, 11 of them are already spiking or in some early stage of blooming or even in full bloom at this point. I have found with my Phalaenopsis collection this year that spiking started much earlier than what I had been accustomed to, and they're all at different stages of development. And I would even expect that a couple in my collection may still decide to spike sort of later, because they are a bit more, I would say, late spring, summer, and even into fall of next year type bloomers. So for those that have not spiked, which is 11 Phalaenopsis plants, there is a chance that several of them will still do so. But let's talk about the ones that are in front of the camera. And this was the orchid that was in the community post where we were sort of watching the new little growth from under this leaf right here. And at first we were saying, is that a root? Is that a spike? And you can definitely tell now that it is a spike. And this is one of the ones that is beginning to set its spike just a little bit later than some of the others, of course, that are already in full bloom. Okay, so holding out hope for those that have not started yet. Now, one of the others that I want to show you is this really large Phalaenopsis. Let me move this one out of the way. And this was the orchid that was featured in my video called The Ultimate Phalaenopsis Repot. And I guess the part of that video that was maybe a little bit unique or unusual was taking a lot of the air roots and wrapping them around the top of the new pot so that they could take root and hopefully send out some branching roots. And so what I want to show you is that that has been, for the most part, successful. Now, I did water this one this morning, so you can see the green roots down in the bottom of the pot, and a lot of those air roots did adapt just fine to being under the media. Of course, some always do die back, but that's normal with any repotting. And after that repot, I have now sort of been rewarded with a gorgeous bloom spike on the way, and this one actually has 2 secondary spikes, so it will sort of be a 3-branched spike here. And I'm really looking forward to this particular bloom, because prior to the repot, this orchid had not bloomed for me for several years. So I will put a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen so that you can go back and watch the Ultimate Phalaenopsis Repot if you would like to do that. Okay, so very pleased with this one. And then the next Phalaenopsis that I want to show you is the one that I was so sad a few videos ago because something, a critter in the grow room, nipped off the very point of the new spike that was developing. And I thought, oh well, bloom lost. Well, not so fast, because within a matter of days I noticed that this bud right here had a swelling, and sure enough, this orchid has decided to continue the spike from that bud just below the place where the bug bit off the first spike. So very, very interesting how orchids are determined to bloom. You know, in the wild, that is how they reproduce. You know, they have to have the blooms in order to make the seeds, and you know, they are just determined to bloom, and this one figured out how to carry on even though a bug won the war with the new little tender spike there. Okay, now the last orchid, and I have a paper towel here because we are going to make a bit of a mess. This is the only Phalaenopsis in my collection that blasted all of its buds one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The fifth one fell while I was setting up for this video. Now, it does look like something may be developing from the very tip here. However, let's talk about why this happened. First of all, this orchid was not treated any differently than any of my others. It was not in any location different than any of my others. You know, it wasn't in a draft. It wasn't exposed to extreme temperatures. It wasn't moved. None of those things. And this is the only orchid that this happened to. So what else could be the reason for it dropping all of its buds one by one? Well, this happens to be Phalaenopsis Friends Princess. And I've had this in my collection for a couple of years now, and it had 2 spikes when I purchased it, and in my care I believe it had 2 more spikes that developed almost like back to back with the others. And I think this is an example of where an orchid has literally just sort of bloomed itself to death with a root system that is not exactly robust enough to support all of this blooming. Okay, so, you know, I'm more interested in saving the plant than I am in forcing it to bloom. So, what we are going to be doing today is taking a pair of clippers, and we're going to remove this spike because this orchid needs to focus on root development. And I'm going to take a short little break. I'm going to get my clippers, and then we're going to dump this Phalaenopsis out of its pot to see that the root system is not well enough developed to really support this blooming. Okay, be right back. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and remove this spike right here, and we're going to see what's inside this pot. Now, the idea here is that I go ahead and repot this right now, and then it will be ready to go for the new growing season, having the best chance at getting a better root system going, so that the next time it attempts to send up a bloom spike, it actually has the energy to see that bloom spike through to the end. I really do think that it is the poorer root system here that caused this orchid to abort that bloom spike, so to speak, and just say, can't do all these buds, and just drop them one by one. Now, it was putting in a last-ditch effort to try to send something off the tip end of that spike, but we're just simply not going to encourage it to do that. This orchid needs to regroup and recoup. Okay, so a lot of dead roots here. You can see that the roots that this Phalaenopsis does have are much older. And so while they are still functioning for the plant, they are a bit woody, and they may not be able to absorb water as well as a newer, fresher root. Okay, so we're not going to do the full repot here because I just sort of wanted to show you that this root has not put down any new fresh roots in quite a while. And when I repot this, I'm going to make sure that some of these dry bracts are removed from the base of this plant, just like what I'm doing now, pulling them off. We're going to have to encourage this one to put down some new roots. Some of the ones around the very base of the plant here, like this one, you know, completely dry and dead. All right, so this one's going to be repotted, and we will hope for a bit of a recovery next year. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this Orchid Medley chit chat. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. The subscribe button is coming up in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and don't forget the notifications bell to let you know when I've posted something new. Thank you all so much for watching, and talk to you next time.